your reminder. And in 2 to 3 minutes, if you could briefly walk us through your journey to your current position. And that can go in any order.
I suppose get started. So hi everyone, happy to be here. And I hope it is okay. I think it might be going a little bit in and out, but let me know if it's a problem. So I graduated in 2020 from the Ohio State University in educational psychology. And right around that time, AERA and APA, there was a lot of talk around working toward theory into practice. And so I was thinking about that a lot. Wanted to be part of more of the translation of theory to other students maybe weren't getting as much theory, and community colleges are not a typical place that educational psychs go. And not that I'm the only one, of course, but I noticed that there weren't a lot of us going to community college. So I decided to look more into it. I didn't have a lot of guidance toward my career. So I'm happy to be talking here today for anyone else who's interested in that path. In my education, I really enjoyed teaching, and I saw an opening there to be able to teach and bring psychology to the community college environment. So that's how I ended up where.
Awesome, thank you. I was a community college student as well, so I was really excited to hear more about your career. Thank you.
Nice. I'll go next. Hi, my name is Ariana. I'm a senior research associate at Arroyo Research Services. We're an research consulting company. And how I got there is not funny. I feel like everything's kind of led there, but I was at Colorado School of Mines working in their teaching and learning center, and I really enjoyed my time there, but I was on grant money, so I was on soft money, and I knew it would be running out in like a year. So I just started looking a little bit, and I actually saw the job posting on AERA's job board, so I applied, and finding like a external evaluator role can be a little tricky because a lot of the companies are smaller, and so they're not necessarily hiring a whole bunch all the time. So when I saw the posting, I applied and I got it. And so I know of some other educational evaluation companies out there, but like I said, they're all smaller, so they're kind of a little bit harder to get your foot in the door. But yeah, happy to talk about that more in a little bit, but that's how I got there.
Awesome, thank you. That's helpful to have that context.
I guess I can go next. So I am a quantitative user experience researcher at Meta, formerly Facebook. How I kind of ended up here on accident. To be honest, I didn't know anyone that was a UX researcher before I ended up here. It wasn't even the job that I applied for, to be honest, but companies, kind of unlike universities, have huge recruiting teams that kind of help steer you in one direction over another based on your skill set. For me, I was planning or hoping maybe to become faculty at some point, was on the job market. My significant other got a job and we had to move to the Bay Area, and living somewhere else was just not something that I really envisioned as part of my relationship. So I quickly put together a resume with some of my fiance's tips. They were really helpful, happy to share them as well. Got a lot of bites, had a few offers, and chose what I felt was the best fit for me. And it has been a really good fit. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Awesome, thanks.
I can go next. So I also kind of ended up at my position as an associate education or educational. I never can keep straight what my actual job title is. Research scientist, which is in the National Center for Education Statistics, which itself is housed in the Institute of Education Sciences, which is all under the umbrella of the U.S. Department of Education. Coming out of college, I graduated my PhD in 2021. I was fully ready to go the faculty tenure track route. The faculty tenure track route, however, was not looking for me, apparently. So I started kind of just applying to whatever I could apply to. I think I ended up finding my job on Indeed because I was checking everything. I was between a couple postdoc opportunities and this opportunity, and ended up at NCES because it was a little bit closer to home than where some of the postdocs were, and also the kind of the security that comes with a job versus a postdoc opportunity, which we know are very temporary in nature, is kind of how I ended up at NCES.
Awesome. Thank you.
Maggie, am I the last one?
You are.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think I kind of want to hear. I'm very interested in joining the breakout rooms of those who've already spoken. Dang, I can't do that. Because I'm sort of the atypical one because I'm late. I'm mid-career, maybe even, I don't know, later career. Having spent 15 years at the University of Kentucky in the tenure world, and having gotten tenure, it's really kind of crazy from that vantage point to leave a tenured professor role for a job outside of academia proper. So for me, I think it was somewhat of a mid-career shift, like the desire to keep things spicy and interesting. And I've been telling people around here at the Mayo Clinic where I'm working now in the healthcare setting that I feel like a grad student again. It's really fun because I'm an education researcher, but I am now in this whole new context where the questions are around, well, how do health professionals, mainly physicians, learn in their period of their long period of training. So as undergraduate medical students, which is like what we would call grad school, and then in residency and fellowship. And so there's all sorts of mentorship that goes on in that. And so when I think Ariana, I think I saw this position on AERA's website. So it's interesting because I've seen a shift over the years that AERA is now posting more, or people are sending more positions to AERA that are not in higher education places. So pay attention to that. And I felt like I was going to be a real long shot for this. And so it was sort of a kind of just a shot in the dark, like, let's see. And then it became more of a reality. And so it's been an exciting move. There is a daunting aspect of not having tenure because there is no tenure here. But I think ultimately it's about your fulfillment in your role. And I think I'll be pushed in new ways to grow as a human and as a like intellectual or whatever, as a researcher, by thinking about context in a whole new way. And I'll keep thinking about K-12 context because those are my roots too. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and there's some good reminders in there about looking at AERA job postings and also just taking that shot and applying for the jobs that you're not always sure that you qualify for, or whatever your hesitation may be. So thanks. Our next question was, could you describe your typical day or general responsibilities in your current position?
I'll go first with that one. I would say a lot of my days are different depending on kind of where my clients are in their life cycle. And so just for some background, if you're not super familiar with external evaluators, let's say a faculty member gets a large NSF grant. That's like a 3 to 5 year grant. A lot of my clients are in STEM fields. So I work with Cal State University Fullerton a lot. They have different grants to help students be successful in STEM. And usually when you're applying for a large NSF or Department of Ed grant, you have to have an external evaluator built in to help make sure you're on track with what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's kind of where I come in. So I do a little project management, I do a little checking, I do some surveying, focus groups, interviews, all kinds of stuff. So depending on kind of where they are in their project plan, some days I will go on site visits. Like in August, I went to Fullerton and was observing a STEM camp that they had for incoming students. And that's a more exciting day for me. It was pretty cool. I got to be in a chemistry lab, which I never took chemistry in undergrad. So it was cool. It was fun to see. But also typically I'll be monitoring like survey completion, doing data cleaning, doing some light analysis, and writing up reports and summaries for them, letting them know how things are going from various stakeholders. So it could be anything from site visits and observations to running interviews, but often it's kind of just checking in on clients with email and seeing how things are going and making sure things are on track.
Yeah, thank you. That's really cool. I feel like I'm already learning a lot that I didn't know was included in that job. So that's really exciting to hear.
I can go next. My typical day-to-day responsibilities change depending on the day, as I'm sure all of ours do, but I spend a lot of time talking about research and talking about the research process. And corporate speak, I suppose we call that socializing. So socializing your research findings, socializing the research process, making sure your XFN or cross-functional partners understand what it is you're doing, why it matters, how it impacts them, but also all the steps involved in conducting the research. A lot of times I think there's a misunderstanding that we're like magicians in some way of we just produce these numbers. In my case, I'm a quantitative researcher. We just magically produce numbers in a few minutes, takes no time at all. And that's not the case. So really trying to make sure that they understand what is involved in the process, how a survey is built, for example, is really important. So there are some days that I spend really doing a lot of heads down work of analysis or reading or whatever the case is, but a vast majority of my time is spending time with product managers, data engineers, data scientists, really trying to help them understand what it is I'm doing and how it impacts their work stream.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
I can go next. So my job responsibilities are not too complicated at the community college. I teach 5 classes. So I teach 3 on Monday, Wednesday, 2 on Tuesday, Thursday, and then yes, definitely a lot of classes. But our institution thankfully has given us Fridays to not teach, at least for the arts and sciences. So that's my typical day. I'm teaching in my office, doing office hours, prepping for class, meeting with students, doing that kind of thing. Once a week, then I'll have a meeting for the club that I'm an advisor for. Every so often, sporadically, we'll have things for the faculty senate that I help to lead with, trying to get everyone on the same page, promote things that faculty have concerns about to try to make positive changes, to make learning better for students. So yeah, a lot of what I've been trying to do is to move towards research-based practices that can help our students to be successful. Because I think one of the biggest shocks that I experienced was being the only educational psychologist and actually the only psychologist at my school, because we're a really small school, is that nobody really knew a lot about the education that the research, excuse me, that comes out of educational psychology. So it's been a good experience to try to talk to other faculty in other areas about that research, also administration, and getting that out there. So yeah, that's basically what I've been working on here.
Yeah, that's great that you can provide that perspective, and I'm sure it's really valuable and useful. Awesome.
So as you can probably imagine, the federal government is made up of a massive hierarchy. And so actually within NCES, I work in the cross-sectional surveys branch. There's also a longitudinal surveys branch within NCES. So the specific project that I spend most of my time working on is called the School Pulse Panel. And it was actually a study that came from one of President Biden's first executive orders. And our project is fully funded off the American Rescue Plan, with the objective being to basically track what K-12 public schools, how they were responding to the pandemic. So we were in the field all last year with a major focus on just tracking, were they doing in-person learning, remote learning, hybrid learning, how many kids were they having to quarantine because of COVID-19, and then it was a monthly survey. So each month there was different topics. So we had topics on what schools were doing mitigation wise. What are they doing to promote learning recovery? How are they addressing student and staff mental health? And a lot of those topics come from working with other parts of the government, working closely with people in the Domestic Policy Council of the White House, and then also people in the Secretary's office, the Secretary of Education's office. So on a day-to-day basis, things change rapidly, but in a typical monthly survey cycle, it involves some level of item development. I work with 2 other people. So we're writing items, those get tested. We do cognitive testing on them with just a few people so we can try to work out kinks. There is some very low level analyses. We're not doing anything really complex because we try to turn this data around in about 6 weeks. There's not a lot of complex data analysis that can be done. And then the bulk of my time specifically on the project is preparing for our data release, which includes briefing White House and Secretary staff on our findings, as well as meeting with various media sources to kind of explain the findings. So I think one of the things I sent was on, or as some recent work from K-12 Drive, I think we've had our studies or our results published in the Washington Post, the New York Times. So a lot of it is focused on translating what these what estimates we get from surveys into a way that reporters can understand, and then they can then translate to their audiences. So day-to-day is very different. And then there's a whole other aspect of contract management and working with other departments of the government. We work heavily with the Census Bureau. They do a lot of the actual data collection process. We kind of handle a lot of the sampling. So it's really varied, and there's a lot of different aspects that go into it.
Nice. That's really exciting. I think I've cited a study or 2 from there. So awesome.
That's so cool. It's so cool to see where people trained in motivation research and educational psychology in general can end up, and the impact like that we can have. I think in my job, I'm new here, so I'm kind of designing my own way by first like building relationships with clinicians and trying to find out from multiple perspectives, what are the problems that you experience in your practice related to education. So that's giving me some sort of a emergent research agenda. But to kind of contextualize my thinking, I've asked, and I'm doing some clinical observations. So I've spent time rounding in the hospital with adults and pediatrics. I've observed a 10-hour surgery very up close, which was something I never thought I would do ever. And watched a fellow who was partly managing that poor woman's long day. And I've observed pediatric surgery. And so I'm doing different clinical observations just to see what is a med student doing in this place? Because they're rotating through as well. What is a first-year resident doing? They're the ones who are doing most of the labor, but it's for the first time. And so you can imagine there's a lot of feedback, a lot of eyes on them, a lot of stress, very little sleep, just kind of trying to understand how, what are the tensions and what's going on here. And then I'm trying to read. So I feel like I'm joining this whole new literature base of med ed scholarship. So there's a lot in medical education that overlaps with what you would see in an education journal. And unfortunately, I'm sure you're not surprised to learn that the med ed people are not reading the education psychology journals, and we're not reading theirs. Yet we're writing about a lot of the same things. So I'm trying to get an understanding of this new area that uses a lot of abbreviations and acronyms, a lot of different terminology. So a whole lot to learn there. Again, that's my feeling like a grad student, and a skilled graduate student, you know, like I have some skills, but so I'm also new to, I don't know, I'd love to hear from, you should come to my breakout room if you use EndNote, because I need a tutorial on that. But when you publish in different journals, they have APA style is very rarely used. And you got to be able to maneuver a manuscript in multiple reference style ways. Like if it gets rejected here and it's one format, you got to go here and it's a different format. So a reference manager is pretty essential, I think, and I'm really dreading that. So I'm having to relearn. I never did do that before. I probably should have. So if any of your advanced reference management users, let me know. Could use your tips. So those are some of the things that I've been doing with my days these days, but no day is the same.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I echo your thoughts early on, and some of what was said in the chat too about just, it's really exciting to see how far EdPsych is bridging into these communities and these different spaces. And I think we all have a lot of really useful skill sets that are a hot commodity and very valuable in these different sectors and fields. So this is really exciting to hear. Awesome. So our next question is, what skills did you earn in your PhD that you feel are transferable to your current position?
I'll go first again. A lot of mine I feel like are transferable pretty cleanly. In your PhD position, you learn how to do research and organize projects. And I'm still doing research and a lot of project management. And a lot of the statistics I learned, I still use. Granted, it's like, I don't want to say baby statistics, but I'm not doing like HLM currently, you know, like it's t-tests and ANOVAs and baby statistics, you know, I use those. I will say the writing style is different. So I did a lot of academic writing for journals, but now I'm writing reports for my clients. So like for faculty, summarizing kind of what has been going on. And so while it is still writing, it's not academic writing in the sense that like I'm trying to get it published in a journal. So I've been at my role about 1.5 years, and I'm still, my boss is still very much like, okay, I get what you're saying here, but we got to make it more simple. We need to, you know, do different things like that. So I'd say a lot of my stuff has transferred over from what I did during my PhD. It's a lot of research, a lot of project management, and a lot of statistics.
Awesome, thank you.
I've this similar, although I would say I'm doing literally no motivation work, which was my whole PhD. So that was a tough transition, but it's a lot of the kind of other things that you do in grad school that have translated. So like Ariana was saying, I'm also doing, you know, those baby statistics. We're just really producing a lot of point estimates and doing t-tests and things like that. The writing also, we have a mandate to write as a federal agency, we have to write at like an 8th grade to early high school level so that obviously everyone can understand it. But I think the thing that probably translated most is the running a research project on your own. So a lot of what I do consider project management, and doing a dissertation, building a project from scratch. A lot of those same things carry over. You know, there's a lot of different stakes involved, but it's basically that. And honestly, the one thing that I learned in my PhD that is probably most closely related to me actually getting the job that I have is that I was really familiar with Qualtrics. The NCES and a lot of IES in general use this very specific survey development website that's super complex coding wise. And as we were doing the first monthly survey that happens in this department, that wasn't really feasible. And so we turned to Qualtrics, which is pretty user friendly, but almost no one in my department had experience in Qualtrics. And I was like, oh, I just did 5 years of Qualtrics. So that was really helpful. I think it personally got me like to the final interview round. And then once I got in, they were like, okay, here's how you access Qualtrics from this side. You're our Qualtrics person now. And so I had to do some relearning and some additional learning, but yeah, it was a lot of the additional things of the PhD program they've translated.
Yeah, that's helpful to hear. And it's helpful to hear too, just for those of us too that are still in grad school too, to kind of keep in mind things that we can get involved in and try to get some experience in before we graduate. And Qualtrics is definitely one of those that's typically pretty readily available. So that's a good one to get involved in. Awesome, thanks.
I can go next. I would echo what's already been said. I don't think there's any skill that I have that I wish I didn't have. So I think they've all been transferable to some extent. I think, the conversations around being able to explore your data thoroughly, which I think, you can call it baby statistics or whatever you want, but that is invaluable. That to me is not just considering baby statistics. To me, that's being able to communicate well, to know your data, to know your audience. I think, I mostly, if you look at my publications, I mostly do structural equation modeling, exploratory structural equation modeling, etc. I can still do that in my current role, but by far the most valuable thing is being able to tell people about who our users are. And I think that we shouldn't get lost in how advanced or not we think that is. That's huge. That's not just analyzing your data, that's knowing your data. So I would echo that, and I would say like really focus on learning data management. That's one skill I'm happy that I have. Another is being able to communicate at multiple levels. You have to know your audience. So if that's, for me, a data engineer who knows nothing about research, or if it's another researcher, we're going to talk about things in a different way. So being able to communicate your work with people that are very unfamiliar with your work is a huge skill that I think I have, but I'm learning even more about it as I go. Another skill that I think is really important is being okay to be a novice. I think that that's something in grad school. Every day you're a novice until one day you're not, and you're considered an expert either by others or maybe you yourself think you are. But to continue learning and not be afraid of the learning process, knowing that it's going to be bumpy occasionally and you're going to make mistakes, and being okay with that. So I think that's probably like the biggest transferable skill that I took, is being okay not knowing. And I think that's a huge hurdle. I've had to learn what a DE does. I had no idea what that was. But in order to ask for resources for a project, doing a lot of project management myself, I have to be able to ask for resources, which means I have to know what everyone else does. So being okay learning has been a really invaluable transferable skill set. I would say that's more of what grad school taught me than ed psych in particular, but yeah, I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful to hear.
Okay, I can go next. So definitely for me, the most important skill was getting teaching experience in grad school. And I think especially something that I didn't necessarily expect is that teaching the college study skills class was really important for me. Because at the community college, they care a lot about promoting student success, obviously. And one interesting thing that I encountered at my school is that they weren't teaching it to the students. So I just started to teach that this semester, and I'm planning to teach it every semester for our students. And I think it's a really important thing to promote their retention. So it's not like they never had the class ever, it's just that they didn't have anyone to teach it. Also, when I was going on interviews, a lot of the community colleges were very interested in that I had experience in student success, since that's a lot of what they care about. So there was one interview that I went on that they were asking me a lot about my experience at the Dennis Learning Center at Ohio State. So definitely for community college, being able to understand how to help students be successful is definitely a key part of it. It also allowed me to get some experience in actually being an advisor over the summer for students. And I think that was a good experience to get. And I think just being able to network as well has been important. So I know all of the faculty actually at my school since it's very small. But yeah, just being able to get to know everyone, the president of the college, all the deans and everyone, getting that networking practice was really important. And I've also been reaching out to some community members, just trying to get some projects off the ground. So definitely, I think networking has been a huge skill that I learned. And then also definitely research translation. So I always tell everyone that anything I do in the classroom is going to be based on research. I can tell you exactly why I'm doing it. And then I've been able to use that too for workshops for other faculty to tell them about all of the different things I do in the classroom and why I do them. So yeah, I think those are all the skills that I've been able to use from my training.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like it's obviously your content is important for a role like this, but I feel like the ed psych background is unique, and being able to help your faculty, like fellow faculty members as well with strategies is really unique too. So that's awesome.
I don't have a whole lot to add, except, I mean, I think all of these things I'm going, yes, that, yeah. But like learning how to do like every part of what I think we in higher ed train PhD students to be able to do can have value in different sectors. So learning how to get your mind around the relevant literature for a problem you care about, learning how to ask a meaningful research question that like matters in this context. So I'm going to be doing exactly that, like many times over. Like, what is an important question to ask here? What's the gap in the literature? How does this question pertain to that gap? What's a reasonable way to try to begin to answer that or respond to the gap, fill it up? So that's all kind of the background work of knowing, well, whose conversation am I joining? What's known about this problem? And how can I contribute? And then that kind of leads to the method. And I just say, like in my own PhD training, and then in my vicarious PhD training of my own students over the years, just being involved in both quantitative and qualitative data analysis has been so helpful for me because I feel comfortable. I'm not an expert, I wouldn't say in either, but I feel really comfortable reading it, having done many, many reviews as both a doctoral student. So review, if you don't, get on with your faculty mentors and try reviewing some papers, because you can learn a lot about all of these, who audience, being sensitive to audiences when we're writing and changing kind of our tone. Reviewing is really helpful for that, I think. And then to the so what part, the kind of discussion part. So I really think of the whole PhD journey of the dissertation process being important to my role as a research scientist now. So I can't really separate those. And then there's a whole bunch of informal learning that happens, I think, as you progress through graduate school, working with people, presenting findings. Gosh, if I hadn't presented as many times as I have, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable talking through a study. So I consider that to be really valuable training too. All of the presentations I've had to create and give is a way of translating research to an audience in a different manner. And that communication's really, really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's really helpful. It sounds similar to like what Dr. Iaconelli was saying too about these like side things that you're doing are really helpful skills to learn for all different types of jobs. It sounds like, so that's great to hear. And then we have one last group question before we move into our breakout rooms. And so if you're comfortable, could you please share the typical or general salary for a position like yours?
Yeah, so I live in Colorado, and in Colorado, there's a law that job postings must include salary ranges, which is really, really kind of nice. And even though my firm, Arroyo, we're all over the continental US, we're all remote, there was a salary range in the job when I applied, so that was really nice. And the range, I believe, was from 80 to 110. That was the range that was offered for the senior research associate position.
Thank you.
As a federal employee, I'm pretty sure if you just Google hard enough, you can actually find exactly what I make. But I was looking back at the job posting, and the range on mine was 75 to 115,000. And again, I live in the DC area, so the cost of living is obviously pretty high, but federal government is surprisingly good at keeping your salary competitive and able to actually live in Washington, DC, or at least the surrounding area.
And a follow-up, Dr. Iaconelli, one thing I was thinking about was your position, is it an in-person role or are there remote positions in NCES as well?
So currently we have to go in 1 day a week, and we work remote 4 days a week, but that is very dependent. So obviously with COVID, everyone was remote. And then President Biden and Secretary Cardona made it the 1 day a week thing, but I know it was before I worked there, but during the Trump administration, everyone had to go in, I think 3 or 4 days a week. So it's a lot of people way above even my bosses had determined if it's a remote or in-person position.
Gotcha, thank you.
I won't speak specifically to salary range. I don't think that was a part of my hiring package, but I will say that Mayo Clinic where I work has a really interesting salary structure that I don't fully understand yet, but that I know that like rank in a higher ed would be assistant, associate, full professor. Rank does not affect salary here. So in the clinical world, if you're an assistant professor of surgery or you're a full professor of surgery, has no bearing on your salary. So they're paid in a sort of different way, which is kind of an interesting motivational structure for salary, so that there's no competition. People are paid on steps. And so I came in at a certain step based on my years of experience in higher education. And as someone who had achieved full professor rank prior, I still have to go through a rank appointment here. But I came in at a certain step. So I'll say in comparison, it's more than what I was making at the University of Kentucky, which I think what I was making as a full professor at UK was in the range of what Ryan just said he was making straight out of grad school. There's a real problem of salary compression for senior scholars in the field, just in case you didn't know, in case no one had told you. But where, I think starting assistant professors at UK might be making $75,000 or $80,000. I mean, more I would hope, but I think it's probably around 80 right now for a starting assistant professor. And if you're not on the tenure track, that would be less at UK right now. And it is public. So at a public institution like a state university, you can find out salary information.
Thank you.
So for me, as you might guess, my salary might be a little bit lower than others at a community college. So I'd say probably on average, the salary for an instructor or professor at a community college is probably around 60, but it varies. However, for me, I know that there's a pretty reasonable path upward. So for example, I am looking at applying to be a dean of instruction, which obviously comes with a higher salary. I don't know exactly what it is, but I am very qualified for that type of position at a community college. And I could continue moving up to be like a vice president of instruction eventually. That's my plan. And so with my degree in educational psychology, I know a lot about instruction, and there's no requirement to have like publications in order to get those positions. It's mostly about your experience. So even though I know I'm lower now, I have a plan to move up further, and I know salary will be increasing along with that. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. And it's helpful too to think about kind of whether these different positions to have kind of a path upwards or where that is and how that looks in each position. So thanks for adding that too.
For me, the salary range I'm giving is specific to big tech. I don't know if this applies to other like different types of UX positions. I also live in one of the highest cost of living areas in the San Francisco Bay Area, so please keep that in mind. A typical range for a position like mine in big tech is probably between 150 and 220 for base salary plus bonus plus stock options. So, and then my position is hybrid by choice, but I could have chosen to be remote.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful to have that too. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for your transparency with this question. I know this can be somewhat of a taboo topic, so I appreciate all of you and your willingness to talk about it. I think it's really helpful for folks as we're thinking about different career options. So now we'll move into breakout rooms. A Motivation SIG graduate student committee member will be in each room to help facilitate with some guiding questions. But this is also a time for audience members to ask questions. So please don't hesitate to speak up or contribute in chat in your small groups. Before we head into those, does anyone have any questions? Awesome. So I will get those started, and you should be able to go in and out of these breakout rooms as you choose. But it might be good to, try to stay in a general one or two for a good chunk of time just to avoid disruptions. But awesome. I will go ahead and open up the rooms, but just let me know if you have any questions about anything.
Hello.